The Truther Girls.
Hi everyone. Well, this is a very sad topic to report on, but I just want to give you an update on what I've been reading about regarding the bombing of Gaza. So as of today, Hamas says Gaza truce agreed. Israel says no deal yet. So according to this article, a Hamas official said Egyptian mediators had clinched a truce with Israel on Tuesday that would go into effect within hours, but Egypt and Israel said a Gaza ceasefire deal was still up in the air after a week of fighting. At this point, according to this article, 130 people have been killed in Gaza by the Israeli strikes, and 31 of those are children. Meanwhile, 5 Israelis have been killed by Palestinian rockets, including 3 civilians. So the death toll is obviously much heavier on the side of the Palestinians. And it says here, Khaled Mishal, exile leader of Hamas, said on Monday that Israel must halt its military action and lift its blockade of the Palestinian coastal enclave in exchange for a truce. So basically what the Palestinians are asking for is a lift on the blockade. And this is why they've been firing the rockets. And well, this blockade issue has gone on for a very long time. That was the whole reason that the what was it called, the Rachel Corrie flotilla, the Mavi Marmara, that they tried to break this blockade, if you remember that, and the conflict that ensued. This has been going on for a long time. Actually, Noam Chomsky wrote a very interesting article, and I'll give you the link for that as well. He personally went to Gaza and saw for himself what was going on there, and he basically says, as many other people say, that it's basically an open-air prison. And so how can you call it a war when you're having a war with people who are in an open-air prison? It's more like a massacre. I find this a really disturbing subject, and I know that, you know, some people say, well, the Palestinians, you know, they hate the Israelis. Wonder why, though, you know, considering. And that they're never going to stop their terrorist actions. That's the word they use. Meanwhile, other people say the Israelis hate the Palestinians and want to kill them all. So you kind of have to wonder whether this will ever end. This article says, flatten Gaza like Hiroshima and mow the population, Israeli public figures urge. And below that headline is a very sad picture of some Palestinian. I can't even talk about this. I mean, it's so upsetting. People always ask me how come I don't report on what's going on over there. It's because it's very hard for me to talk about. Anyway, you see the picture. They're praying over some dead children, and because it's really the innocent children that are the greatest victims in all of this, you know. And why is this being done? You know, for politics and for power, and meanwhile, innocent people and innocent children are dying. So they're mentioning this, and I went to check out the source, which is in the Jerusalem Post. It is, in fact, there, an article by Gilad Sharon, a decisive conclusion is necessary. And he says, there is no middle path here. Either the Gazans and their infrastructure are made to pay the price, or we reoccupy the entire Gaza Strip. And well, he says things like, to end this, basically, you have to squash Gaza. He says to accomplish this, you need to achieve what the other side can't bear, can't live with, and our initial bombing campaign isn't it. There should be no electricity in Gaza, no gasoline or moving vehicles, nothing. Then they'd really call for a ceasefire. But they are calling for a ceasefire. They want this to stop. They're just also asking to stop the blockade. He says, there is no middle path here. Either the Gazans and their infrastructure are made to pay the price, or we reoccupy the entire Gaza Strip. So it is quite extreme. That's one view. And while we're on the subject of Israelis who want to basically wipe out the Gaza and flatten it, there was also this. Now this is from the other side, the electronic intifada. Dancing Israeli students chant death to the Arabs at rally backing Gaza slaughter. Well, it's a rally at a university, and they're singing something that sounds kind of like a national anthem. And then some of them are chanting, I guess, death to Arabs. I mean, I don't speak Hebrew, but I heard the word Arabim, which is the plural of Arabs, so I guess that's what they're chanting. But at the same time, you hear of Israelis protesting the strikes on Gaza, and you hear of Israelis and Jews all over the world saying that this is wrong. So it doesn't mean that, you know, all Jewish people want this to be happening. I think actually probably the majority, well, I can't say the majority, but probably a lot of them don't want this. I'm sure that they don't want Palestinian children dying. It's just that everyone's always fed this line that Israel has to defend itself. And anyway, this goes back very far. But yeah, there are a lot of Jews who are against what's going on, who are against Zionism. Here's an example. This is Rabbi David Feldman speaking in Toronto against Israeli attack on Gaza, November 15th, 2012. And what he's saying is that this is wrong. It's no good for, obviously, Palestine. It's also no good for Israel. It doesn't represent Jews. It doesn't represent Judaism, and it's not biblical. And it should stop. And he's not the only one. There's also this organization, Neturei Karta, Jews United Against Zionism. And we see these guys here quite a lot. They protest quite often, and they say the same thing that the other rabbi said, which is that this is not Judaism. This doesn't represent Judaism, and it doesn't represent the Torah, and it's some kind of perversion of it, and it's just evil and wrong. And people had sent me some links and information about how this all started, because this goes really far back. And it was basically the Europeans and the UN that carved up Israel carved up Palestine and created the state of Israel back in the 1940s. And there's this very interesting picture that I found on Facebook. And here you can see how originally the green part is, this is all Palestinian lands. And there were some Jewish settlements in the white areas. Next, with the UN plan of 1947, you have the establishment of the State of Israel. 2005, this is all that's left of Palestinian land, these little green specks, and the rest is Israeli and occupied land. So you can see that the Palestinians' land just keeps shrinking and shrinking. I just want this to stop, but it doesn't really matter so much what I think and what I want, because, you know, who am I, right? I don't really have much of a say in it. But all I can do, I guess, is say what's going on. And I don't know why. I don't know why. It's so hard for me to talk about this. You know, it's not just, you know, with Palestine and Israel, but anywhere that this happens, it's wrong. But these days, the only people who are the vehicle of imperialism and genocide are the Anglo-American Empire and their extension, which is Israel. Anyone else who would try to do this, well, the UN would step in with their peacekeepers, or the Americans would step in. Well, they wouldn't do it unless there was something in it for them, like some kind of valuable natural resources. But, you know, we live in this day and age where, you know, we talk about there being international laws and human rights, and still it continues. You know, and when I look at this map, I just think, well, if they had to establish a state of Israel, and now it's after the fact, I mean, Israel exists. I don't want Israel to be wiped off the map either, you know. I'm not saying abolish the state of Israel, but Israel exists. But why did they have to take over all the land and cram the Palestinians into an open-air prison? You know, but then again, I don't understand that much about it, and I know that there's a long history, but honestly, I think that there are people higher up who want this to continue, this kind of conflict. I don't think it's necessarily the Israelis themselves or the Jews. I think the Israeli government probably does whatever they want, the same way that the American government does whatever they want. and doesn't represent the will of the people. Like, most Americans want to be pulled out of the wars in the Middle East, and still your country is in the war. So I would guess that, you know, probably Israelis, being after all human beings, would want there to be some kind of peaceable solution, I would like to think. And all I can do is hope that this will stop, and I guess ask you to pray for Palestine and Israel. And that's all I can really say about it. Alright, thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.
The Truth the Girls.